Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to JoyNews Today. We're coming to you live from our studios in Kokomlimli. We're on DTT because we're free to air on DSTV channel 421 and Go TV channel 125. We are your home of independent, fearless and credible journalism. Coming up this afternoon, Parliament gets its fair share of disconnection from the national grid. Over some 23 million cedis owed the power distributor. It comes a day after Accra Academy was thrown into total darkness. Also this afternoon, MPs affected by the floods caused by spillage of the Akufo-Addo Dam bears teeth at government, demanding an urgent replacement of voter ID and other essential cards lost in the floods.
Of spillage recovery efforts, the time has come for the relevant public institutions to carry out a special and comprehensive exercise in all affected constituencies by immediately replacing these important IDs and documents.
We have details, but Deputy Majority Leader Afenyo Markins calls their bluff, asking them to go out there to the institutions involved. Also this afternoon, President Akufo-Addo makes a strong case for the withdrawal of 30% of Ghana's public funds and assets deposited in foreign banks as he rallies other African countries to do the same in a bid to empower African banks and multilateral institutions.
He said we should take a decision that a minimum of 30% of the reserves of each one of us, sovereign reserves, should in fact be invested in the African multilateral institutions.
We'll hear shortly from former Finance Minister Setakpe, who says the move will make little difference given the mismanagement of the central bank. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and X Spaces by JoyNews on TV. My personal handle is @Nana Aisha. Please do stay for details. Many thanks for choosing us. President Akufo-Addo is proposing that Ghana withdraws at least 30% of all public funds and other assets kept in foreign banks and financial institutions. According to the president, his country and other African states are fond of placing their sovereign reserves in foreign financial institutions, a situation he believes is derailing much-needed development financing for Africa. Speaking at the presidential dialogue on African Union financial institutions, organized on the sidelines of the 37th African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the champion of the African Union financial institutions rallied his colleague African leaders to take a collective decision for all African countries to withdraw 30% of foreign reserves and instead deposit them in African institutions.
The proposal that I'm going to put to the plenary and I want to share with you, so it will form part of our discussions this morning, is that we should take a decision that a minimum of 30% of the reserves of each one of us, sovereign reserves, should in fact be invested in the African multilateral institutions. I speak about the ADB, I speak of Afro-Exim Bank, which would strengthen their balance sheets and strengthen their capacity also to facilitate more and more resources for our development. If we find a way where we can increase the financial power of our own institutions, we're in a better place to finance our development. Already we've seen the tremendous work that the ADB and the Afro-Exim Bank have made, especially during this critical period of the COVID pandemic and the COVID difficulties. So these institutions are institutions which are ours and which we can trust.
Joined by former Finance Minister Sir Tekpe via Zoom for more on this. Mr. Tekpe, I'm grateful for your time. Do you support the proposal from the president that at least 30% of our foreign reserves be brought back to Africa?
Thank you very much. I support proposals that will strengthen our African multilateral institutions, but those proposals have to be realistic. So yes, I do, and with all due respect to His Excellency, my President, it has a lot to do with the way in which we manage our economies, which is where I come from, on this, excuse me.
Well, you say that, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, which is where I come from, in making, my, comment. I did not put all the blame on the central bank. We all know that, much of the problem of the central bank resulted from its financing of the fiscal. And therefore, we have to look at the entire economic, situation. But let me give you, first of all, if we are going to borrow from the African Development Bank, Afrianism, to support trade or to support infrastructure, as we have with Fufu Solar and other projects of the African Development Bank, they are going to be loans. And the only reason African Development Bank is not at the table in the debt discussions that we are having is because it is grouped among the multilaterals with African Development, with the World Bank and the IMF itself as a regional bank. Or else, the loans that we received from them in the past would have been a matter of negotiation. And that is why, the official, that's why the multilaterals are not at the table. Now, secondly, the strength of the African Development Bank to give us loans depends on their ratings. I mean, what most of us do not know is that much of the money that the African Development Bank gives to its member states is actually borrowed. And the African Development Bank is rated AAA, one of the highest. Afrianism is rated BAAA. So they are in the same Western financial markets, which where they are getting their money. The reason they have those high ratings and pass it on to us is that they're able to borrow at very low interest rates. And therefore, they lend to us sometimes paying only fees like the World Bank or IDA rates, which are very, very concessional. We have become a middle income country. We are fast losing access to some of those funds. But the more important point is that if the African Development Bank goes to borrow from those sources, or indeed if the African Development Bank uses our reserves, unless we say they should use it only as a buffer and not use it as part of its loan activity, and we default, we'll be impairing, those ratings by those two institutions. They would not be able to borrow at those concessional rates, and therefore the interest rates they themselves pay, will be higher. And this is why I bring the whole issue down to domestic. Another source from which the African Development Bank in particular, and indeed the World Bank, gets their soft money, if I put it that way, their soft money and give us sometimes aid, like the budget support, which was on your news this morning and in the afternoon.
So if you say it will not make any much difference, that means that you're suggesting that African multilateral institutions cannot manage their own affairs?
No, it will definitely make a difference. But my point is that it is not about they only managing their affairs, but it's about we managing the loans we take from them. And I'm saying that if we are going to take loans and default, we'll bring them down. If we are going to give them reserves, which they use to guarantee support, our reserves, support those, loans that they give to member countries, and we default, those guarantees will be called, and our reserves will be called. I mean, that's what it means. So I'm saying that, the strength of the African Development Bank It depends on the strength of its member, countries. And I'm using our situation now as an example as to why, if you have more countries being in the situation with Ghana is now, then they wouldn't make a difference, because probably they will be at the table discussing their debt, which is, which we are unable to pay. Moreover, we are borrowing now. We borrowed in the past from some of these multilateral institutions at very low concessional rates, sometimes even no interest, just fees. But how are we repaying? Unless we really, really tighten the budget, we are repaying, with treasury bills, which are at much, much higher rates. So how do they make that positive impact? We have internalized very high, interest rates. So actually, the point I'm making simply is that it is, if the European Investment Bank is strong, it is strong because its members, the EU members, are strong in its support. And if the African Development Bank is going to be strong, then we must look at how, we manage, our internal affairs. Let me give you a local, very domestic example. We have said much of our reserves that we are talking about, should have been beefed up by now by the oil revenues in the Heritage Fund and in the sinking fund and in the, which we call the Ghana, the Heritage Fund Stabilization Fund, and whatever is not spent in the second fund, which sources from the Stabilization Fund. So when you talk about BOG reserves, those are the reserves. Today they are depleted. So which reserves are we even going to be contributing? That's why 3 oil fields.
I'm grateful.
And remember that before we even went into the crisis, part of the reason we went into the crisis was that our reserves were depleted to about 1%, right? Equivalent to 1% of mass import, where we have often been at 2.5%, 3%, even during difficulties. So I'm saying that, yes, I do, embrace, the support which the multilaterals are giving us. I do embrace strengthening them. Then if we continue on this path, and if more countries join the path on which we are, we will be a retreat. Otherwise, we'll be collapsing these institutions, which may not happen. And the only reason they may not happen is because we have shareholders sitting on the board of the African Development Bank.
That means that a lot more depends on the African Development Bank to be able to manage these reserves wisely. Otherwise, it will not really make any difference, just like you put it. I'm grateful for your time. Mr. Setsekpe is a former finance minister of Ghana. Now, Parliament today had its fair share of power disconnects from the national grid over some 23 million cedis that's owed the power distributor. It comes a day after the Accra Academy also was put in total darkness by the ECG. I've been joined by my colleague Kweku Asante, who will be telling us more about that. But first, let's see what really happened in Parliament.
Right Honourable Speaker, the House deserves to be assured that our compatriots will not be disenfranchised in this year's presidential and parliamentary elections. Practical steps ought to be taken by the EC to ensure that all who lost their voter ID cards have their cards replaced. It is not good enough for them to be told by the EC that they can vote without their cards, when we know that they could be subjected to unwarranted challenge and frustration by party agents, while others may not even bother to show up to vote because they do not have their cards. So, Mr. Speaker, after 5 months of spillage recovery efforts, the time has come for the relevant public institutions to carry out a special and comprehensive exercise in all affected constituencies by immediately replacing these important IDs and documents. The institutions of concern are the Health Insurance Authority, the National Identification Authority, the Electoral Commission of Ghana, Birth and Deaths Registry of Ghana, and the Passport Office. May I also, Right Honourable Speaker, submit that any replacement exercise by these 5 institutions of state should not only be immediate, the intervention must prioritize convenience where officials could be deployed in the affected communities and the displaced camps. And also, it is my firm expectation that these replacements must be done free of charge on purely humanitarian grounds. Right, Honourable Speaker, I respectfully invite you and this August House to make consequential orders directing these 5 public institutions to take urgent and concrete steps to have all the lost Ghana cards, health insurance cards, voter ID cards, birth certificates, and passports duly replaced for all victims of the VRA spillage from the Akosombo and Pond dams. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, may I remind the Akufo-Addo Bawumia-led administration to commence work on the resettlement and general compensation of all the victims. It must be a scar on the conscience of national leadership to watch fellow citizens remain in tents and congested classrooms 5 good months after the VRA spillage. Government must be alive to its constitutional obligation.
So that was Okujeto Ablakwa, MP for Norton, leading MPs who are affected by the Akosombo Dam spillage, who are accusing government and asking for urgent and immediate replacement of all identification documents lost by the victim. Birth certificates, voter ID cards, the Ghana card, and a host of other important documents were lost in the devastating floods last year. And he was delivering a statement on Parliament. He made the point that there could be mass disenfranchisement if voter ID cards, for instance, are not replaced ahead of the 2024 elections. Well, a furious MP for Whole West, Emmanuel Bejua, argued that it appears there's no government in the country, given how abysmal the response to the floods and victims have been.
Government that we all know is working does not need a statement in this House to register people or replace their cards. It's because the government is not working. That is why a member of Parliament will call on government to register its own citizens who have lost their cards, national identification card, national health insurance card, voters register card. Why should we be calling on government without digitization? We are talking about rolling out so many tap-to-go cards and so on and so forth. We cannot replace our own cards. It's a shame. Mr. Speaker, I want to call on you, the Right Honourable Speaker, to direct this government to make sure that any citizen that has lost his card through this pillage should go and register them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The majority side had the response to the MPs affected. Listen to Afenyo Markins, his Deputy Majority Leader.
They want you to err with all your experience. I will aid you not to err. Mr. Speaker, the Electoral Commission is there. It's an independent constitutional body. No. The call should be made on the Electoral Commission. Mr. Speaker, the Electoral Commission belongs to government. Speak into the mic. Mr. Speaker, the Electoral Commission should receive this call. The National Health Insurance Authority should receive this call. We cannot narrow everything to government. We may not be getting the solution. Mr. Speaker, a week ago, Honorable Ahi recalled the assistance I got when they were in government. We had water crisis in Winneba. I went to Ghana Water Office. I was there. I visited them several times. I went to the Ministry of Works and Housing. Mr. Speaker, I was there personally. I got the necessary support I needed. All I'm saying is that if we make the right call, after all, those who come here, they are our colleagues. There's a limit to the politics. There's a limit to the politics. So let us engage them. Beyond the talk on the floor, let us move from our offices. Let's move from our offices. and get there and engage them and look for solution. If we just talk, we want to achieve the political effect, yes, but the practical effect of the people benefiting would not be gotten. We will not get it. So, Mr. Speaker, our colleagues, Honorable Jiva Gomeshik just showed me a picture of what happened at her place. She and I are finding some minimum solution. But the broader one would have to come from government and the agency responsible. Let us together direct this appropriately and get the solution so that we don't just end it here as a talk shop.
Now, Parliament had its fair share of the disconnection from the national grid for owing the distributor some 23 million Ghana cedis. Now, my colleague Kweku Asante is Parliamentary Affairs correspondent. He joins us with more. Kweku Asante, first, how did this disconnection issue resolve?
Well, it hasn't been fully resolved yet. The lights are still on in Parliament, though, despite the ECG's insistence that they will put off the lights for that 23 million Ghana cedi debt. We understand there are some frantic negotiations ongoing to settle some part of the debt so that ECG will keep the lights on. But the ECG had clearly informed the House that it intended to disconnect the Parliament of Ghana from the national grid due to this debt. The last time this happened, Parliament coughed about 5 million Ghana cedis to settle part of this debt. But Parliament is still owing up to 23 million cedis. ECG officials have been in the House today. The lights haven't gone off yet, but we understand some talks are going to happen. But if there are no satisfactory talks, ECG says they will be left with no alternative but to disconnect the Parliament of Ghana because of this huge debt.
This afternoon, we're also learning of an urgent meeting to address the impasse brought about by the rumored change in the majority leadership. The president is also expected to meet the caucus at 6 p.m. today. We understand, however, that a change of leadership is still on the card, and there are still elements in the majority and the governing party who are demanding the change. Has that meeting happened yet? What more do we know?
Well, Aisha, there is still simmering tensions in Parliament. There are so many elements within the governing New Patriotic Party caucus in Parliament who believe that the change is merited to give the New Patriotic Party a chance out of the 2024 election because Parliament will be such a key issue. But there are still elements also within Parliament who believe that Osei Mensah-Bonsu must be allowed to see it to the end of the term. So there was a meeting scheduled for this morning to iron out the issues, especially because NPP MPs in Parliament led by the First Deputy Speaker, have insisted that it is only the caucus in Parliament that can cause that change. And so this morning, that could have been on the agenda, but that meeting has now been cancelled because of the President inviting these persons for a meeting at the Jubilee House this evening. So at 6 this evening, there will be a meeting between the President of the Republic, Nana Addo, and the caucus in Parliament to try and trash out some of these issues. But like you said, the change in leadership is still on the cards. There are still those who believe that the change must happen and that Osei Mensah-Bonsu served the party quite well. But this is the time to bow out, to give fresh faces the chance to lead, and that Alexander Peña-Makin should be the one to lead, so that should the party remain majority or go into minority in 2025, they can continue their fight. So at 6 p.m. today, the MPs will all go to Jubilee House and try and see if this issue can be ironed out.
Kweku Asante is our parliamentary correspondent. Definitely there's more we'll be bringing your way from Parliament in our subsequent bulletin. Let's talk about employment because 1.3 million Ghanaians between ages 15 to 35 were unemployed in the first quarter of 2023, according to the government statistician, Professor Samuel Kobneni. The figure represents a 14% increase within the same period in 2022. The statistics also reveals that the Northeast region had the highest unemployment rate in the country at the end of 2023. These statistics are contained in the 2023 Annual Household Income and Expenditure Survey Quarter 3 Labor Statistics Bulletin. My colleague Kenneth Jesse, who's been monitoring this for us, joins me with more. Ken, what more do we know from this survey?
Right, Aisha. So one revealing statistics about this survey is that more women continue to be unemployed than their male counterparts. And then the intensity of the experience of unemployment spells. That means the number of times an individual has been unemployed. In a period of 6 months, they found out that 1,128,000 persons were unemployed for 6 months. And then in 9 months, they realized that over 700,000 people were unemployed for continuous 9 months. And then the share of youth not in employment, education or training, according to them, declined in 4 out of the 6 interquartile periods. And then they mentioned that 2 regions, the Ashanti and the Greater Accra region, were the only 2 regions to consistently record unemployment rates higher than the national average during the 7 quarters they did that survey. And 1 in every 5 of the persons who experienced an unemployment spell from the first quarter of 2022 to the third quarter of 2023 had completed tertiary education.
Was there any recommendation as to how this can be improved?
Well, they did mention that actually there were more people, steadily quarter on quarter, they realized that people were getting into the labor force. So they mentioned that about 440,000 persons joined the labor force between the first quarter of 2023 and the third quarter of 2023, of which more than 60% were employed during the period. So although unemployment was on the rise, more people also got into the labor force, and 60% of them got employed.
NIJC is a man monitoring this for us. There's more we'll be sharing with you from that survey from the Ghana Statistical Service. Let me take you now to the northern region, where police in Tripoli have arrested 2 suspects, Amadou Issa, 22, and Abbas Mumuni, 15, for breaking into the Tripoli government hospital and stealing laptop, computers, and other office equipment. Ilyasu Tanko joins us with more. Ilyasu, what more can you report on this arrest? All right, so Ilyasu Tanko will be joining us with more on this theft in Cherponi Government Hospital. Definitely we need to know what has become of that arrest. Let's go to Kumasi, because the Ghana Water Company Limited is blaming the erratic water supply within the Greater Kumasi metropolis, unstable power supply to some of its water supply stations in the Ashanti region. The company says 3 of its stations, the Barikese and Owabi water treatment plants and the Achiase Buster Station, have in the last few weeks experienced power outages from the Electricity Company of Ghana. The situation, it says, is adversely affecting water distribution to several parts of the Greater Kumasi metropolis. Emmanuel Bright Kwaku has been monitoring the impacts of the situation on the businesses and households in the region and now reports.
This is the sound heard from the taps of piped water systems in many households across the Greater Kumasi metropolis. These taps thirst for water. In the past few weeks, water supply in the metropolis have been erratic, adversely impacting households.
Anytime you need water, you either have to store water because you don't know when the taps will go off. And with the washrooms is a big hell, because if you go and wee, you have to flush.
The situation is not only impacting households but businesses. Water is essential for production of palm oil, especially for the local variant known as Zumi. Ophelia operates this palm oil processing hub at Angloga Sobolo.
Ye here in Siopa. Oh, yet me soon sio gallon we be say 10 ebrokra. Yet me nya ho abe enu anko ade a ebru 20.
So when you come to this oil processing hub, ordinarily you should find barrels containing water here, but from what I see, they are all empty, and the little they've managed to get is what this woman right here is trying to get oil out of, and the situation is adversely impacting production of oil here.
Yet me yenya 20 dakro onintene e wo se mujai ni aka. E de to. Mo de to on so a ade chinso e be sei. Enwo ne be sei we ade chiso na we ya enye debium. Na wo de akoye enwopa ni mpokura no. Wontimi mfa nguduane so enni. Ti de wo tonma seminafo. Eno ye nso yenwo a ye no. Ni boedin. Enti se ya waboka.
Sarah, a hairdresser, shares similar sentiments.
Chuchadia unyensio enye ejuma shosho. Bula no be kona yasa. Omo sori ahumachi. Ti o be kona na asa. Isi aba akukura ni. Nti se menye nsio sa na. Me ma mintumi enye ejuma enye ska.
Over 80% of households in the Greater Kumasi metropolis have been without water for the past few days. The Ghana Water Company is blaming the erratic supply of water within the metropolis to unstable power supply to some of its water supply stations, including the Barakese and Owabe water treatment plants. 3 of these water stations have in the last few weeks experienced power outages. Residents continue to prevail on the water company to resolve the perennial water shortages.
I'm using and not as a woman used to be. The Abamo and a quite private faswa, Emma Hotabi Finima. I was raised on Baba Kenyan and Jessica, and she is saying, sir.
For Joy News, my name is Emmanuel Bright Kwiku.
The Asante Otumfuo said to the second has indicated the possibility of turning around Ghana's economy despite the extent of its deterioration. He is admonishing the newly appointed Finance Minister, Dr. Amin Adams, to lead the charge of rebuilding the economy. The Asante further drew the attention of the minister to the enormity of the tax, especially as demands of the public continue to soar. The finance minister paid a courtesy call on the Asante as part of a working visit to the Ashanti region. Nana Addo has more.
Decision to seek financial bailout from the International Monetary Fund by the government became relevant due to the ailing economy. As part of conditions of the program, the country's debts were restructured, affecting completion of some government-initiated projects, including some major projects in the Ashanti region. Asante Otumfuo said to the second emphasized the need for favorable policies to ensure recovery.
The economy is in a bad state. Times are very tough for a lot of people, but if we strategize very well, it will recover. Wherever your elder brother left off, you have to continue. We are not new to the ministry, and that's to your advantage. I will plead that you collaborate with your colleagues at the ministry to improve situations. The burden of the whole country falls on you now because we all look to you for finance.
The Finance Minister, Mohammed Amin Adams, who is on his first official visit to the Ashanti region after assuming office, sought to get updated on some stalled government projects in the Ashanti region. The Kumasi International Airport, which is about 70% complete, was one of the places of interest. Project manager George Tavares explained the extent of work done so far, reiterating the project stalled for financing.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the business segment on JoyNews Today with me, Pius Kojo Baka. Minister for Transport, Kweku Ofori-Isiama, says the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority is actively negotiating with Delta Airlines to change its planes which ply the Accra route. Now, there's been several complaints from Ghanaian travelers about the service offered by the airline during allegation or including allegation that their aeroplanes are rickety. Now, a Delta Airlines flight from Accra to New York had to make an emergency landing in Portugal recently. The minister tells Parliament the emergency landing was due to an oxygen leak.
Flight number DL157, operated by Delta Airlines on Boeing 767-300, on Friday, 8th of September 2023, scheduled from Accra to New York, diverted to an island in Portugal due to an emergency occasioned by a crew oxygen leak in the flight deck emergency mask system. Mr. Speaker, the flight crew followed the recommended safety measures which directed them to immediately divert to the closest suitable airport, which is Lajes, an island in Portugal, and landed there on 5:51 hours a.m. Mr. Speaker, Delta then dispatched an available aircraft to Lisbon that arrived at Lajes on 5:27 hours. The flight then departed Lajes at 17:20 hours and arrived at JFK, New York at 12:53 hours local time on September 9th, 2023. Mr. Speaker, prior to this incident, the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority had authorized Delta Airlines to operate to Ghana with two different types of long-range aircraft, the Boeing 767 and Airbus A350. Delta option to utilize the Boeing 767-300 on the Accra route was cautioned when their flight diverted back to Accra on August 1st, 2022 due to a technical problem, which was adjudged by GCAA as will occur on that particular route. Mr. Speaker, fortunately for us, Delta changed that particular 767. The said aircraft, that the Boeing 737-300, was subsequently banned by GCAA from being used on Accra route.
Responding to concerns by NPs about the poor services rendered by the airline, the minister explained that there's active negotiations to get the airline to change some of its aeroplanes plying the route.
Delta Airlines has since introduced another Boeing 767-300. Mr. Speaker, following this, and in line with the industry procedure and practices, GCAA officially protested to Delta Airlines with a formal report on the 14th of July 2023. Subsequently, several meetings have been held with Delta Airlines, both in New York and in Accra, as established by ICAO Convention. These meetings between GCAA and Delta Airlines, Mr. Speaker, were aimed at comparing the airline to use other type of aircraft approved by GCAA to replace the 767-300. Meanwhile, GCAA has stepped up its surveillance of airlines operations in Accra. Thank you. I can assure the honorable member that as we did with BA, by persuading them, nor by negotiating with them, by having a deeper discussion with them, for them to change their aircraft to A350, we are doing the same thing with Delta. And I have no doubt in my mind that they will yield to some of these discussions. And if it is that they need to change their aircraft, I'm sure they will bring a better one. Thank you very much, sir.
That'll be all for business for now. I am Pius Kojo Baka. Dara will be at 1 p.m. with the marketplace. Sports is next.
Let's do sports now on JoyNews Today with me, Muftau Nabila Abla. Ghana's Olympic Games qualifier against Zambia is in limbo as media reports suggest that the Black Queens players are threatening to boycott the match over bonuses owed them. The senior female national team has played 6 matches and each player was supposed to receive at least $7,500 for the 6 matches they have played. But the Ghana Football Association and the Ministry of Youth and Sport hasn't paid them those monies, and they have decided that they will not play the match until their bonuses are paid before the match on Friday. The Ghana Football Association and the Ministry of Youth and Sport have not reacted to this issue yet, but what we do pick, what we understand is that there were a couple of meetings last night at about 11 p.m. where the players agreed that they are not going to honor the match until the monies are paid to them. So the total money due each player, per Joy Sports sources, is $7,500. The players actually believe that that amount is less than the bonuses paid to each Black Stars player per match, because each Black Stars player is paid $10,000 per match, but after 6 matches played, which is the total number of matches they have played, their bonuses is $7,500. So they are wondering why the Ministry of Youth and Sport and the Ghana Football Association have not paid them the money. Now, let's talk about Accra House of Folk, where some supporters are demonstrating against board chairman Togbe Afede. He says that those who have decided to demonstrate against his leadership are against the progress of the club.
Everything is being done to strengthen us in our pursuit of the ultimate preeminence in African football. And this much we've communicated time and time again, you know. Yes, I heard some people were going on demonstration yesterday, and I asked myself, what do they want? What do they want? What do they want that we haven't done? We've done everything, you know. After all this, the only thing that House will not have is a stadium. We are streets ahead of, you know, all of our counterparts. I would say in the whole of the South region will come out as one of the very best. So sometimes it's difficult to know what they really want. And so it leads you to believe that they just don't want the progress of this club. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say. You know, no matter what we do, they don't seem to like it. They all are aware we just got a new coach. They all are aware we just got a new MD. So what are they demonstrating for? We talk about putting in place a new board and announcing that new board at our next AGM, which we had planned for this month. Delays in the audit of the accounts have meant that we have to postpone the AGM to next month. So if we are going to have a new board in place next month, what are you agitating for? It looks like agitating for agitating's sake. You know, it looks like people who don't really, a few minority who don't want to succeed. So whenever we take very good steps, they probably want to divert our focus. I would plead with them to try to be real supporters. Real supporters, even during difficult times, stick by their clubs, you know. And they should remember that we love the club as much as they do, if not more. That's why we spend time and resources on the club. You know, let them be real supporters. You know, not people who want to cause distractions, diversion of focus from the things that matter that we should be doing. I mean, yesterday the demonstration in particular was so much uncalled for, particularly when they've all been aware of the humiliation Ghana suffered in Ivory Coast, which is partly blamed on the fact that not enough investment has been done into the game. Not enough investment has been done by way of infrastructure. So if we are doing that, if we are setting the pace, I mean, they better feel proud about what we are doing.
That's your sports for now. We do have more sports stories on myjoyonline.com. We appreciate your time.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Showbiz segments with me, Jacqueline Ansumayabwa. Now, the lead consultant for Robert Summit Law Group, lawyer Bobby Benson, has urged Ghana Actors Guild to find ways of reducing cases of sexual harassment and exploitation in the film industry. Bobby Benson, who spoke on Joy FM Showbiz A to Z, told Kwame Dazi that apart from resorting to legal institutions for redressing such cases, association like Actors Guild could champion this cause.
Again, coming back to like the Actors Guild, which is the only form of union you have on paper, assuming they have a pact, because the producers and the directors also have their own,
they have theirs.
Their union.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
That they will sign an undertaking with the Actors Guild. eschewing this sexual harassment, it will be signed that the moment any actress or actor, because like we said, our brothers also suffer sometimes, complains that you have attempted to or sexually harassed him or her, then they are going to blacklist you. Then they will not go after the producers or the directors. So is it possible that the Actors Guild or the leadership of the Actors Guild put together a pact between them and the leadership of the producers and directors?
That would have been an ideal
Then
situation.
they would sign it and say that all your members are undertaking that they will desist from ABC. At least you must start from somewhere. Because once they put it in writing, it becomes written, it becomes binding. Secondly, is it possible it is put on every movie set, that sexual harassment is not encouraged on this set?
Well, it's a wrap for the showbiz segments with me, Jacqueline and Sumayabwa. But Aisha,
Jennifer, what?
I know,
She's
right?
looking gorgeous.
For her age, 54.
Goodness me.
Tell us the secret.
When I grow up, I want to be like her. That's how I wrap up the bulletin. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Log on to myjoyonline.com. There's more of the news and updates of all the developing stories. So enjoy the rest of our program.